Hello, I'm Bryceton LeFlore, and welcome to the Tennis Journal podcast. The following is an interview with Florien Meir, the founder of top YouTube tennis channel OnlineTennisInstruction. Florien has helped thousands of players around the world improve their tennis, especially their serve, through his technical insights and his innovative teaching approach. In this conversation, we break down the serve from the ground up, including common mistakes, key fundamentals, how to approach improving your serve mentally, and drills you can use to progress no matter what level you're currently at. This interview will provide a clear framework for developing a powerful and a reliable tennis serve. Enjoy the interview.
Florien, could you tell us a little bit about your background and what inspired you to be a tennis coach on YouTube?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, first of all, Bryceton. I started online tennis instruction, I think in 2012 by uploading like the first video, 11-12. At the time, it was not a business though. I was coaching a 14, 15-year-old player who was one of the best in the world at the time, like on her way to a pro career. And quite frankly, I started doing this because I got injured a lot. I was coaching, high performance juniors and some pro players. I was a hitting partner for them a lot, and I enjoyed it a lot. But I also then had tennis elbow and shoulder problems and hip problems and all that stuff. And I realized, at some point I should probably figure out a way to make some money without hitting the tennis ball all day long because my body was not holding up. So that was kind of the start, and then I saw that some people were uploading some videos on YouTube. I just started doing that without big intention, just uploaded some videos, and it kind of just very slowly developed from there, so that's the origin story. I really was doing it a little bit more out of, desperation because of my physical situation. I was still coaching, but I just was not able to be hitting with these high level players anymore all day.
Could you go a little bit more into your coaching background prior to the YouTube channel, and also what experiences and mentors or things like that shaped your coaching philosophy? Because you kind of do have a unique coaching philosophy. I remember you did mention you work with Great Base for a little bit, and I think that's kind of one thing that we have in common. So could you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I've always had a kind of knack for coaching. I remember playing in German prize money league teams. I was a solid junior player. I was if I didn't get injured, I could have easily played Division I college tennis, but I was not on track to be a high level pro either. So I was a solid player, but I always, even at 16, 17, I was playing on these men's prize money leagues, and I would be like coaching people who were much older than me. I always had kind of this, I could easily see what they should be doing instead of what they were doing. I've always had a kind of this knack for coaching, right? So I think there was something inherently there. Also, my body was made for pro tennis. That became clear very early on. So, then I did something else. I studied in university after I quit competing. I studied business. I worked in investment banking, but I realized I wanted to be back in tennis. And then I went to the US. I got an MBA in sports management, and then ended up getting back into coaching just a little bit by accident, but also because something was drawing me there. And so, I started coaching again in really full-time in 2006, 7 back then it was called the Patrick McEnroe Tennis Academy. It didn't exist very long. Patrick McEnroe was starting something in Miami, and I was a part of that. There were some good junior players, Sasha Vickery, who's still a pro these days, and a couple of good junior players. And so I started coaching there, really loved it right from the start. The moment I got on the court, again, coaching, I just loved it. And then from there, I went to the Ever Tennis Academy, which was a great experience. I got to work with some really high-level players, like Madison Keys, Ayla Tomljanovic, a lot of guys as well. Some other female pro players that most people wouldn't have heard of. But so it was a great experience there. After that, I did go to the Great Base, which is, our kind of commonality, which is a Steve Smith. Didn't spend that much time with him, honestly. I think about 8 months, but it definitely was influential because it really got me into the world of Vic Braden, which is, Steve worked for Vic Braid for I think 30 years or whatever, and Vic is really the kind of the pioneer in tennis instruction that did all the research even many years ago on biomechanics and so forth. So I got I was always looking. I was always looking for where's the best information. That got me into that. That was very helpful, made a big jump there in my knowledge. And then I came back to Germany, and what really took things to a whole new level is I was still looking for more answers, couldn't find much anymore in the tennis world. And then I went to golf instructors. And in Germany, we happen to have a couple of the best golf instructors in the world. There's more money involved in golf instruction and golf in general. So, you can easily make $200-300 an hour if you're a good golf instructor. And so that, they have more technology that attracts a lot of like investors and smart people. And so golf instruction is years ahead of tennis instruction. So then I really dove into that. I took golf lessons from these guys and started exchanging ideas with them. And that's been like probably the biggest influence. So the first big influence was probably Vic Braden, all the background he did. And then what I learned from the golf instructors probably took things to a whole new level. And then we keep evolving the method over and over.
That's very interesting, and a lot of these things I didn't know even with all my experience with you. So that's great to share. How would you say Vic Braden's philosophy is different from the other things out there? And could you go more into why golfing helped you learn so much about tennis coaching?
Well, I would say, Vic did all the research, and what I learned there from Vic's work and then through Steve Smith also was fundamentals of great strokes, that haven't changed, even since however many years, right? So, inside out swing path, high, low, high swing path, sequentially using coiling and uncoiling the body segments and so forth. The fundamentals that are kind of the same with everybody. And also Vic understood that, it requires a technical approach, a real technical approach to make a technical change. Like you have to slow things down. You can't really do it while playing at regular speed. And so the fundamentals, were really, really good that I learned there. What took things to a new level in the golf world was, in the golf world, it was really about personalized feedback. They call this ball flight oriented teaching. I call it that now in tennis as well, which is basically like we're trying to identify the number one lever that will make your serve or your forehand better. And we just trying to tweak that. We're not trying to make you fit a model of fundamentals. There's like 15 fundamentals that have to be in place. And now you have to learn all 15 to hit the ball better. And it's going to take 6-12 months or whatever. The approach is you find the number one thing that once tweaked will get you to hit the ball better now. And that way you keep players in competition. They get a success experience relatively quickly, and that keeps them motivated. And that way you can step by step improve the technique so that in the end they can still, if it's a junior player, they can still have all the fundamentals in place, but it's a lot less painful and a lot more effective in my experience.
That's interesting. And one thing that I kind of go through as a coach is I'm kind of having this internal conflict because I don't want to teach too much, but some things are really important to teach technically. Where would you say that like balance is? And I think you did talk a little bit about that in your last thing, but I want to go deeper.
Yeah. So it always starts with the goal of the player. The situation is different. Like I have like last year I had a female pro player come to me. She had 2 weeks to improve her forehand, and then she was off to some tournaments in Florida, right? And so within 2 weeks, we got to get her to significantly hit the ball better because that's the constraint, right? So we have to be very careful about what we tweak, how much she can handle, right? Now I'm working with a 12-year-old boy who's one of the best, in Germany and in Europe, but there's a lot more time to develop the fundamentals, right? And then you have an adult player come to you who, plays 4 times a week in their league matches and doesn't really want to pull out of their league matches, or some of them do for a while, some of them don't. So it depends a lot on what the individual situation is. It also depends a lot, quite frankly, on the talent level of the player. To me, there's 2 types of talent in tennis. So that's coordinative talent and there's athletic talent. Coordinative talent is basically how well do you make contact with the ball, even with bad technique, right? Athletic talent is like how fast can you run, how high can you jump, to simplify it. And so if somebody has very high level of coordinative talent, somebody who doesn't have a high level of coordinative talent, you have to be more careful. So it is very, the situation varies, right? And so we try to apply or whatever's appropriate, do whatever's appropriate in that given situation.
Mm. Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, and yeah, that's very insightful, and I like that balanced approach. Why do you think the serve is so difficult for players to master, and what are the most common obstacles that hold them back?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think it's pretty common knowledge that the serve is the most complex motion in a lot of sports to learn. I think it's actually even more difficult to learn than a golf swing. Even though in golf, you have a longer club and a shorter and a smaller club face. But the problem in tennis is, with the serve also, it happens behind your head, right? So we have very little awareness of what's going on back there, right? So it's a complex motion. It happens behind your head, your arm movement, right? So you're not even looking at it. And so it's also an emotion that is not very natural, right? So I always say even if you have perfect technique, you can injure your shoulder, no problem, hitting serves, because anything that's above shoulder level here is unnatural for this type of joint that we have here. It constricts, it makes it tight in here. So even with great technique, you can get injured. So there's a lot of factors there that make the serve, complicated. And so it is the most challenging part for most players. It's also why we focus a lot on it, because most players really struggle with it. But with the right approach, anybody can improve their serve. We have, 85-year-old players who've played all their life with a pancake serve come to us and make changes. Obviously that's, not the norm, but at that age, right? But that happens, right? And we have, the 50, 60-year-olds who are committed that come to us to change their serve. My success rate is close to 100% if they stick with the program, right? And obviously it goes a lot in there, but anybody can improve their serve. So that's really the good news. It is complicated and it can take time. It can also go relatively quickly. It really depends on the individual, their coordinative talent, what type of change is necessary, and so forth. But anybody can improve their serve quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's excellent. And also, so in your opinion, what's the one thing that most coaches miss when teaching the serve?
What's the one thing most coaches miss? Well, so first of all, I think that you really have to slow things down if you want to make a change, right? So we don't if we want to make a technical change, even with professional players, we take them away from the baseline. So I had, a couple of years ago, I had a guy ranked 250 in the world come to me with a weak serve. We did a case study there. And the first couple of days, he didn't hit a single serve from the baseline because we made significant changes. And so he was doing shadow swings, he was doing kind of the progressions that you're familiar with. Then when he started hitting balls, I had him hit from behind the service line, hitting down the line, taking the result out of the equation, really going through these. And this is a professional player ranked 250 in the world, right? But if you want to change muscle memory, I mean, it's really, we call it muscle memory, but the memory is in the brain, right? But so if you want to change that, you have to really slow things down and go through these progressions. So that's number one. Almost nobody's willing to do that. And in tennis, for whatever reason, it's not that common. In other sports like golf and the martial arts, it's totally normal. Like in the martial arts class at the beginning, they do everything in super slow motion, look at all the angles of, how they do the hits and everything. In golf, they constantly film themselves, they look at it, but in tennis, for whatever reason, players just want to think it's not real practice if you're not on the baseline hitting regular serves. So that's number one. If you don't do that, you have literally no chance of making a significant change, So that's kind of from the approach. In terms of the technique itself, scratch your back is something that really, really upsets me, because it does so much damage. Or the down together, up together does so much damage. The movement goes right to left over your head in this direction. You can't, if you touch your back, you don't have a fluid motion anymore. So those are two of the very common, tips that really cause a lot of damage.
Also, I was wondering, why do you think that these two, really big serve myths continue to exist in the tennis world?
Great question, right? I mean, the coach's education is just weak. That's the source of all this, of all these problems. Why so many tennis lessons happen without video analysis, and why. And I'm not blaming the coaches. They're not being educated properly. Like you've done the USPTA certification, right?
I did a PTR certification.
PTR. Okay. Yeah. So I don't know how that was. I did the USPTA and it was like a weekend. And as long as you can hit a decent ball and answer a few multiple choice questions, you've got your certificate, right? It might have changed by now. This was 15, 17 years ago when I did this, might have
They
changed.
yeah, they did explain like how to structure a lesson, and that's one thing that's one thing that I took from it. But as far as like technical understanding of the game, there was pretty much nothing there.
And honestly, the technique is very complex and changing techniques is complex. So if they're trying to offer it in a weekend or even 2 or 3 weekends, it's not possible. And golf in Germany, to become, a certified golf instructor, it takes like 2 years of continuous training. Like that, it doesn't mean that you can't, like, when you're in that process, you're like a junior coach and teaching some lessons, but it takes literally like 2 years of intense studying to become a certified golf pro here in Germany. And so we would need something like that, well designed, to really change this. So, and since coaches don't have that, they go with the stuff that they hear, and they just pick it up somewhere.
Yeah, that's a really unfortunate thing that we see in tennis, and also I think there's a lot of things people hear that may not be correct, and then they just keep repeating it, and then it just becomes a trend, and no one knows really how to change it.
Yeah. Well, nowadays though, we have super slow motion, right? So we can show that that stuff is not correct. You're not going to find a pro who's scratching their back on the serve.
Yeah, exactly. My next question is, how do you think that players should approach improving their serve mentally?
Be ready for a little bit of pain, right? Like you have to be willing to judge yourself by the process and not the result in the beginning. So am I executing the technique the way that I should be executing it? And if I do that and the result of the serve is not good yet, then that's okay. Because you first got to learn to execute the new technique correctly. And then the result may not be great yet. But then a little bit later on, once that technique becomes more natural for you, then the results will start to show up, right? So you do have to, we try to minimize this by our ball flight oriented approach, right? So we're usually not trying to make we're trying to make them a surgical approach, trying to have a surgical approach, minimally invasive surgery, they would say in medicine, right? So that's what we're trying to do. But you have to have a bit of patience, you have to be ready to judge yourself by the process and not just by the result. And so, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I always tell my players to make sure they're process oriented, not results oriented. That's one thing I read from Nick Saban. He would always drive that approach home of like being process oriented. And a lot of times players do get worse before they get better. And that's one thing that you have to just see with, anything in when you're trying to improve something. I think that's a really good way to look at it.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you this, having coached so many players now over these last like 20 years and like so many technical projects, so many club players or pro players at any level, junior players looking to change their serve or forehand, the players that there's two commonalities among the players that improve the fastest and the best. Number one, you can't really influence is coordinative talent. Okay. Some people just have it. I coached here in Germany, I coached a 14-year-old girl. I changed her technique, everything, over 10 years ago. She later became top 50 in the world. Her name is Karina Witthöft. I think I coached her and I did a pretty good job with the technique. She became top 50 in the world. If I had not done that, not changed the technique, she probably would have been about 150 to 200 in the world. She still would have been a pro, even with bad technique. So there's a lot of talent there. So talent does play a role, right? So that's the one that's a little bit hard to influence. But the other one that you can definitely influence and that plays a huge role is how good you are at looking at the process instead of the result. And there's a real broad spectrum among players that come to us. Some people just absolutely cannot take it when then they hit a couple of double faults as part of this process, and they're ready to give up and they basically go a little bit mental, right? And the players that have more of a process mindset improve much faster, right? And you can definitely influence that. You can work on that part. So that's definitely been one of the big things we've learned over the years.
Yeah, and I also think that can be a really important mindset for winning your tennis matches because you're going to lose a lot of points, but you just have to kind of just have to stay committed to playing, and then a lot of different things can happen.
Committed to executing the things you're trying to execute, right? You at the end of the day, you cannot influence if you're going to win or lose. You can influence, trying to execute the things that or do the things that you have, and then you set yourself process goals, right? You don't set yourself, the goal is not to win the match. The goal is to, execute my forehand the way I want to execute it and go for my shots or whatever it is. But that's really critical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, let's move on to the next question. So, you emphasize things like shadow swings, the right to left movement, the racket drop. Can you explain why these are so important?
Well, okay, so the right to left, the reason the racket should move right to left over your head is because then you come in at a good angle into the racket drop, right? And the racket drop is really, what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to be in a good racket drop. We're trying to pre-stretch the muscles in the shoulder and chest here. Internal or external shoulder rotation is the number one power source. So we're trying to optimize that. And by going right to left over our head, which, by the way, all the great servers in the history of the game have gone right to left. Lefties obviously left to right, but you just come in at the optimal angle towards the racket drop and max optimize your chances for a great serve. There are some servers who are a little bit more back to front who can still hit big serves. Stan Wawrinka comes to mind. He's a little bit more back to front and still hits some pretty big serves. But that guy is also an absolute physical specimen, right? And phenomenal talent. So, but and he's not one of the best servers. I mean, he does have a big serve, but the best servers, really all move right to left over their head. So that's why right to left is not so important, because there's a specific reason, because we want to get into a good racket drop. That's what it's for.
Mm-hmm. And why do you teach with, some of the methods that you teach with, like, sort of this progressive approach, not hitting from the baseline, shadow swings, using different visual aids?
Because it's the only way to develop new muscle memory. I haven't found a better way. If maybe one day we can implant a chip in your brain and then you've got a great forehand, maybe Elon Musk will come up with something like this. But until then, I haven't found a better method to make changes. If you cannot execute the new technique in a shadow swing, or when I'm hand feeding you a ball, you have zero chance of executing it at full speed. It's common sense. I don't know where it got lost in the tennis teaching philosophy, the whole game-based approach. There's a lot we could talk about that, but I'm obviously, and there are advantages to a game-based approach, but not if you're trying to make a real technical change.
To be honest with you, the right to left and racket drop movement, that framework really helped me, because I did understand the technique, but just how to look at that really helped me refine my coaching, and that's had great results with how I coach. Because and I think, unfortunately, a lot of coaches teach like the trophy position, but I don't think that gets to the gist of how you actually need to learn the serve. It sort of seems like more of a like a product of doing those other things right, like the right to left and the racket drop, rather than
the trophy position is something you just move through. It's like I don't even like to call it the trophy position, because it leads to people thinking it's a position that you get into. It's just something that you move through. It came from a trophy. Like, it literally, like, they designed a trophy that they would give to winners of a tennis tournament, and that's where it came from, right? And so, all the great servers, they have a fluid motion. They move right to left without a pause or a stop in their motion, and they don't stop in the trophy pose. They just move through it. So to me, it's a non-issue on the serve. Obviously, you can be in an incorrect angle in what's called the trophy pose, right? Like, your arm can be in an incorrect angle, but then we address that, and we don't even call it the trophy pose. So I prefer avoiding that term altogether.
Yeah, and when I was a high school tennis player, I really had a perfect trophy position, but until I sort of got some coaching and saw myself on film, I would be going palm up. So I mean, I would be in the perfect trophy, but then I would just go palm up, and that was slowing down the power quite a bit. So yeah, there's definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to, if you put your arm out kind of here, if your palm is up and your hand is back here, it's like super constricted, right? If I have my palm down and my hand here, I can very easily go this way, very easy. But here, palm up, and like, it's super constricted. So yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to do that.
Yes. I'd like to get your insights about this. How long would you say a player needs to stay at that stage? Like we know, like there's a certain amount of swings they should do per day,
Mhm.
et cetera. But like that's one thing I'm a little bit confused about because I noticed some players learn faster, some slower. But is there like a specific way to know how long a player needs to stay at these little stages where they're doing these learning drills?
Basically, move on to the next stage as soon as you can kind of comfortably execute that stage 80-90% of the time. But so we break it down into like literally like 8 stages, right? The first one being a shadow swing and the last one being tournament play, and so there's a lot of in between stages. One thing we've realized over the years also is shadow swings are not even that important. Shadow swings are good in the beginning. Like you first have to get it right on a shadow swing. But what we find is players can get it right on a shadow swing relatively quickly. It doesn't take very long until they can do the shadow swing correctly, right? Is that your experience as well?
Mm, yeah, I see people hitting amazing shadow swings, but then when they get to the ball,
Right.
it all falls
Yeah.
apart.
So we actually nowadays we try to move away from the shadow swings as quickly as possible. So we start with the shadow swings. Once the shadow swing looks pretty good, we introduce the ball, right? And then we will do like let's say on the serve, we'll do a dummy toss. We'll let them toss the ball up in the air and do a shadow swing with that. Now they have to coordinate the movement of the tossing arm with the new movement of the hitting arm. Much more complicated than just doing a shadow swing. They're not even hitting the ball yet. But so that becomes much more, and then we teach them how to coordinate these two movements properly, right? And so that we call it a dummy toss. And then afterwards, if they can do the dummy toss well, then we move them on to what we call a soft tap. And at this stage, they are like taking a foam ball or a regular ball, and they're hitting against a wall or the back fence or anything like that. And the only goal is to execute this new technique correctly and just make contact with the ball and with a soft tap. That's why we call it a soft tap. We're not really hitting the ball yet. And when they can do the soft tap correctly on a relatively regular basis, then we let them hit a little bit down the line from the service line, and slowly increase the difficulty level that way. So it's once that stage looks pretty solid, 80-90% of the time, we introduce the next stage. And then, and again, that's why this varies a lot. So it depends on so many factors. How big of a technical change are you making? Are you like rebuilding your serve? Are you just like fine tuning one little element? How coordinatively talented are you? Some people, we get them, if I had a 12-year-old earlier this year on the court, still working with him. He's the most talented player in coordinative talent I've ever seen in my life. I taught him a new serve in 2 hours in a morning session, like from palm up, learning right to left. He was only doing kick serves, took 2 hours, and he was executing it really well from the baseline. In the afternoon, he went on to play a tournament match, right? I didn't even know this. I would have advised against it, right? But we were just getting to know each other. And so the next day I had him back on the court and I was like, so, how do you feel about what we did yesterday? He's like, yeah, great. I played a match in the afternoon yesterday and with the new serve worked great. I was like, what do you mean you played a match? It's like, so yeah, I played a real competitive match as a 12-year-old against adults in a men's kind of league. And he won that match with the new serve. And so, I mean, that's, I've seen a lot of players. That's the highest level of coordinative talent I've seen so far. So it really depends on a lot of factors, how long it takes. So some people it can take, if you are rebuilding your serve from the ground up, you really want to do that, it can take like 3 months until you're hitting solid serves from the baseline. But some people like this boy, was in the afternoon, he was hitting much better serves. And if we have a small change, it can also go really quick, and anything in between. So it depends on so many factors.
What we just talked about is a good segue into our next question. So, what drills would you emphasize for players to learn their serve?
You can definitely always start by learning to throw the ball the right way with the right to left arm action, which is, by the way, that's why I believe Americans have so many good servers, because if you want to throw a football correctly or a baseball, you have to move the arm right to left over your head. And all the quarterbacks and pitchers you look at as a right to left movement. I'm sure you've looked at that on YouTube and on TV, right? So, learning that right to left movement, you can easily do that just by throwing a ball against the wall and work on that. So, that's always a great, great starting point with the right to left movement, throwing a ball. Very effective. After you learn the right to left, you gotta figure out how to bring that elbow forward, leading with the elbow. And a great drill for that is where you toss the ball up, you do your right to left, and then you let the ball come down on the elbow. We call this the elbow the ball drill. So kind of, that way you've got the right to left, which is critical. That's where you want to start. And then you want to learn to get into a decent racket drop, and you got to bring the elbow forward to do that. And so the elbow the ball drill is something that is very, very effective there as well.
If you had a beginner player, how would you progress them step by step from the very first stages of learning the serve all the way to elite level?
It's a great question. I would start definitely by throwing the ball with a right to left arm action, right? I would take the racket out of their hand. I would have them throw the ball with a right to left arm action. I would focus on them having a fluid motion without a stop while throwing the ball. Then I would probably give them a children's racket next to learn to make contact with the ball, or even like do that dummy toss, where they're not even hitting the ball. You're not going to be able to avoid them hitting with a little bit of an open racket face and a little bit of pancake, right? So if it's a beginner, you're just not going to get around that. So I would kind of work on that proper motion, right to left, leading with the elbow. I would work on that, but also let them hit a little bit where they would most likely hit a bit pancake, waiter's tray type of serves. But they need to learn to make contact with the ball as well. And I don't believe in having them like do the shadows and right to left and all this for like 2 months before they start to then, and with a continental grip before they can then try to hit a ball, right? I mean, I think they need to have fun and hit the ball relatively soon. So I probably wouldn't put them on a continental grip in the beginning. It's just too hard. I'd probably start them a beginner. I'd probably start them on an Eastern forehand grip, or maybe a 2.5. So either on 3 or 2.5. I haven't experimented much with that, but I think starting with a continental grip would just be too tough.
I'm a little bit surprised you would say that. So don't start with you wouldn't start with the continental. So you would just
I probably wouldn't, because it would take too long for them to make decent contact with the ball and to be able to start a rally, So we do incremental grip changes, right? So if somebody is on a bevel 3 on the serve and we want them on bevel 2, which is continental, right? We move them from 3 to 2.5. I would never move them from 3 to 2. We make incremental grip changes because it just takes too long. Otherwise, there's too much frustration involved.
Okay, interesting. So when you say like what is it, elbow the ball drill?
Mm-hmm.
And I actually do this quite a bit in my beginner lessons. I do a little bit of this every day, but I'm just kind of wondering how you would approach that. Would you just get them to do these little drills? Like for instance, I might get them to hit the ball at the elbow, do a little bit of contact with the fence, get them in the half serve position, and get them doing the half serve position, and then just hit it to the other side of the box. And then as I feel that they're ready and they're able to execute that, I slowly move them back. But I'm just wondering how you might approach that lesson like day to day.
Yeah, that's probably exactly what I would do. Like I would incrementally build it, right? I would start with the shadows. I would beginners, I would just let them use junior rackets. The shorter the racket, the easier it gets to coordinate. So I probably would never let a beginner use a full racket probably in the beginning on a serve, at least. Forehand might be different. It's easier. And then I would do, 5 minutes, a couple of shadows. Then I would let them throw the ball. Then I would let them do the elbow, the ball drill. I'd let them, like you said, contact against the fence, that sort of thing. And then maybe that's like 10, 15 minutes. And then I would start to have them hit some serves from the half serve position and see what happens. And when I see what happens, I would film it and I would show them the main thing that's going wrong. And then I would try to design the drills around fixing that main thing that's going wrong, because all of these beginners, if you have 3 or 4 in the court, they're going to end up, there's going to be overlaps, but they're still going to have individual problems. And so, and I always view it as it's our job to identify the most relevant individual technical problem that, once fixed, will get them to make better contact with the ball, will get them a better result when they hit the ball. So, I would do the generic stuff. I would let them hit some, 10, 15 minutes. I'd let them hit some serves from the half serve position, see what happens. And then based off of that, film that. Based off of that, I would then show it to them and make adjustments and then give them custom drills, each player, based on what's breaking down for them.
That's interesting. And I use a video in the lessons, and I always found that players find it very interesting to see themselves on film. I think it deepens like the learning connection. I just want to wrap it up with this question. So if you could give 3 key takeaways for serve improvement, what would it be?
Number one, really slow things down, right? You got to work on this in these mini progressions. You want to look at it. We call this a process goal ladder. So your goal is always just to get to the next step on the ladder. So goal number 1 is a correct shadow swing. Goal number 2 is a dummy toss with a correct shadow swing. Goal number 3 is executing what we call a soft tap with relatively correct technique. And you move all the way through, and then goal number 8 or something like that is execute the new serve correctly in a match, right? So your job is always just to get to the next step on that ladder, and don't think about when it's going to be, when you're going to be able to do it in a match. So that's like number 1, really focus on that. Number 2, learn the right to left arm action. You got to learn right to left. Number 3, you got to learn to lead with the elbow, to get into a good racket drop. So those would be like the three main things I would recommend.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So I think that's a good stopping point. I just want to say thank you so much, Florien, for hopping on this call. It was a really, really amazing talk, and I've learned so much from you over the couple of years we've known each other. So I really appreciate everything, and I think this will be a great learning aid for a lot of people that are trying to improve their serve. Also, you had something that you wanted to mention about your offer.
Yeah, so we have our coaching is based around personalized video reviews. Where we identify the main technical problem with your individual technique, right? That's kind of what we've moved towards to our online coaching over the years, our in-person coaching as well. So, for your audience, we can offer them a $1 trial, which is, that gives them access for 30 days to all of our online courses, all the materials that are not on YouTube, our online courses for all the strokes. And then it comes with one personalized analysis of the stroke of your choice from, somebody from my coaching team that are all trained in how we do things, right? So it's, for $1, you can get, feedback on your serve or any other stroke from somebody who really does this day in and day out. Which, I think is a pretty good deal to try this out. We don't offer the $1 trial very often, but we can put a link for your audience here somewhere in the description of your video or even in the video, wherever you decide to put it later on.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So everybody check out Florien's offer. He's whatever you get from it is going to be an amazing benefit to your serve or whatever else you're trying to learn in tennis. This has been Bryceton LeFlore with another tennis improvement video with founder of Online Tennis Instruction, Florien Meir. Again, thank you so much, Florien, for this great talk. And for everybody out there, great luck out there on the tennis court. Thanks.